technology that we're benefiting from. Granted, the world has a lot of, there are a lot of problems which we'll talk about, but, this is, the development of science and technology, and people have written about this and talked about this as well, has been climbing exponentially, and the acceleration of all the technological advances and scientific knowledge seems to be accelerating, and the acceleration is accelerating. So, a lot of people, many people are aware of this and feel overwhelmed, but, on the top side, it's really tremendous and has a lot of tremendous possibilities for human advancement, that we have this ability to communicate. But the problem is, one of the problems is, how do you, we are all feel like we're deluged with information. How do you sort it out? How do you evaluate it so that you can, pick out the BS from what's valuable? How does an individual do that? And it's not just talking about, giving a pep talk about being a more critical thinker. A person, in order to become a quote-unquote critical thinker, you have to have some training in how to do that. What does critical thinking involve? What does it have to do with creativity? What does it have to do with other aspects of living our lives more successfully? So that's one problem, that, it's trying to sort out the information, not feel like you're getting buried in it. And one of the other things is just that, people, if we don't have the ability to sort through this stuff, then we can end up with very, very poor decision making. And again, people are beginning to wonder about the quality of leadership in general, both in corporations and in government. So, this is all these changes, and Krzyzewski was just, when he died, he was just beginning to see the initial stages, so to speak, of the computer revolution and all this digitalization. But back in 1921, in his first book called Manhood of Humanity, he wrote very clearly about the exponential factors in the development of humanity. And basically what he said in that book was that human beings constitute a entirely different class of life, apart from, he wanted to really make clear that human beings were different from other creatures. So he even went so far to try to push the idea, which is interesting, that man is not, or human beings, Homo sapiens, is not an animal. That we constitute an entirely different class of life because of our ability to learn from the experience of others and to pass on what we have learned to the following generations. And what he decided was that, this is something that other people have observed over, many, many years and centuries even. This is not the notion that human beings pass on what they've learned to others, and people can build on what the previous generations have done. That's an idea that's been out there for a while. But what Krzyzewski did was he saw this as basically the defining characteristic of humanity, that we constitute what he called a time-binding class of life. Time-binding. So in that book, Manhood of Humanity, what he said basically was, and he even had some equations in there which are interesting, if nothing else, but basically because of this time-binding ability, humans have the capability, like no other creatures, to increase or progress our knowledge and ability to deal with the world in an exponential fashion. So he was predicting the acceleration of human knowledge and technology back in 1921. And the problem was, what he was also predicting was that our abilities to do this in the narrow fields that define what we call science and technology nowadays are just very limited. And in the rest of life, in our politics, in our ethics, in our human relations, in the ways that we manage ourselves as individuals, we are not using that time-binding capability. We're not learning from our own experience even sometimes, let alone that of others. So basically, he was predicting this ever-increasing divergence between our ability to, between the accelerating technology and our ability to evaluate it in a useful way, and also our abilities to live with each other in some kind of ethical and peaceful fashion. So he predicted that, as we go on, unless we learn how to think differently, basically, there's going to be an increasing gap between this progress in small, limited areas. Building weapons, they have these tremendous weapons now that have, automated target seekers. I mean, they're robots that have some kind of basic purpose-fulfilling function that once you turn it on, it's going to go and it'll find its target. And if there are things to resist it along the way, that machine will be able to sense that and diverge, and nobody has to be directing it. So we've gotten that phase of technology to build weapons to kill people. But we don't seem to have the kind of technology to learn how to manage our own consciousness. We don't seem to have very much of a technology that's organized in any way to live better with each other. So, what Krzyzewski was basically saying in 1921 is we need to explore our capabilities and really correct this situation, because he had seen enough horror in World War I on the Eastern Front, and basically he had hopes that if people started to think differently, basically, that maybe things could be different. So basically, after 1921, he went on to explore the mechanism of time binding. This is the way he described it. How does it work, and how can we get all those impeding factors, all those things that are obstacles for us to think better in our own individual lives and our social relationships, how we can develop something that will maybe divert the catastrophe. So that was what he did for the next 30 years till he died.
So what is general semantics?
What is general semantics? It's a very confusing label for a very interesting discipline. Krzyzewski was dealing with it in his lifetime, when he realized later on that the name that he had picked to call it the discipline he had created was being misunderstood. People, even students of his, and I think he was guilty of it as well in the beginning of his work, when he wrote his second book around 1933 it came out. And afterwards, for a number of years, he would talk about his work as semantics, as a kind of shorthand. And then later on, he realized